The first sensation was cold. Not the gentle chill of morning air, but the bone-deep, crystalline cold that spoke of death and preservation. Marcus Chin's consciousness crawled back to him like a reluctant tide, each thought emerging from the fog with painful clarity. His body felt wrong. Too light, too stiff, as if he had been carved from ice and left to thaw. He tried to open his eyes, but the lids felt sealed with frost. Panic should have flooded his system, but even that response came sluggishly. His heart beat once, twice, then settled into a rhythm that felt ancient and tired. Memory fragments swirled through his awakening mind. The war, the bombs, the desperate choice to enter the cryopod as civilization burned around him. How long had it been? The question formed slowly, like words written in winter breath. The pod systems hummed to life around him, sensors detecting his revival. Warm air began to flow across his skin, and the ice coating his eyelashes started to melt. With tremendous effort, Marcus forced his eyes open to slits, expecting to see the sterile white of the underground bunker where he had volunteered for the long sleep. Instead, he saw stars. Not the ceiling of the facility, but actual stars, brilliant and alien, streaming past in patterns he didn't recognize. The pod was moving, and the view beyond its transparent aluminum canopy showed the deep black of space punctuated by distant suns. His mind reeled. The bunker had been buried 300 feet underground. How was he seeing space? A soft chime echoed through the pod's interior, and a holographic interface materialized before his eyes. Text scrolled across his vision in clean, efficient letters. Revival complete. Subject: Marcus Chun, volunteer 2847. Sleep duration: 50,124 years, 3 months, 17 days. Current location: deep space, coordinates unknown. Warning: multiple life forms detected in proximity. 50,000 years. The number sat in his mind like a stone, too vast to properly comprehend. Everyone he had ever known was dust. Earth itself might be dust. Yet somehow, impossibly, his pod had survived and he was alive, drifting through the cosmos like a message in a bottle thrown into an infinite ocean. The interface continued its clinical report. Pod systems operating at 23% efficiency. Life support stable for approximately 72 hours. External scan reveals artificial structures in proximity. Attempting communication protocols. Marcus tried to speak, but his throat was raw and his vocal cords felt like they hadn't been used in millennia, which was literally true. He managed to croak, then tried again. Where am I? The pod's AI, a simple program designed for basic monitoring, couldn't answer such a philosophical question. Instead, it provided coordinates and sensor data that meant nothing to him. But as his eyes adjusted and his mind cleared, he could make out shapes in the darkness beyond the pod. Ships, massive, graceful vessels that curved and flowed like living things, their hulls gleaming with bioluminescent patterns. They moved with purpose through the void, and as Marcus watched, he realized they were approaching his tiny pod. The largest vessel, easily a kilometer long, extended what looked like tendrils of light toward him. First contact protocols activated. The AI announced with the same tone it might use to report a minor system malfunction. Unknown vessels attempting communication. Multiple frequency attempts detected. Caution advised. Marcus almost laughed at the understatement, but the sound died in his throat as something touched his mind. Not a voice, exactly, but a presence, alien yet somehow familiar. Images flooded his consciousness. Vast cities that grew like coral beneath alien suns, beings of impossible beauty and terrible purpose, wars that had raged for eons across the galaxy. And through it all, a single recurring image: humans. Not the humans of his time, but something evolved, changed, magnificent. They stood at the center of it all, not as conquerors, but as something far more important: catalysts, bridges between the impossible and the real. The presence withdrew, leaving Marcus gasping inside his pod. A new voice spoke, this one clearly artificial but far more sophisticated than his pod's simple AI. It spoke in perfect English, though the accent was strange, musical. "Greetings, Ancient One. We have waited long for your awakening. The largest ship moved closer, and Marcus could see details now, not metal or ceramic, but something that looked almost organic, as if the vessel had been grown rather than built. Ports opened along its side, revealing chambers filled with soft, golden light. "You are human," Marcus whispered, though even as he said it, he wondered if it was true. The beings he glimpsed through the ship's transparent sections were tall, graceful, with elongated limbs and faces that seemed to glow with inner light. Human, perhaps, but changed by 50 millennia of evolution. "We are what humanity became," the voice confirmed, and somehow Marcus could hear the smile in it. "And you are what we once were. The last of the unchanged, the bridge to our past. We are the Luminari, the children of Earth's children, and we have been searching for pods like yours for 1,000 generations." The AI in his pod chimed urgently. "External docking protocols initiated. Life support systems will be compromised in 20 minutes without intervention." "Your ancient technology fails," the Luminari voice said, not unkindly. "Allow us to bring you aboard. There is much to explain, and little time." Marcus felt the gentle pull of artificial gravity as his pod was drawn into the alien-human ship's docking bay. The chamber was vast, filled with other pods, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Some were clearly ancient like his own, their metal surfaces pitted and scarred by eons of travel. Others were newer, sleeker, suggesting that the search for survivors had been going on for a very long time. As his pod settled into a cradle of crystalline supports, Marcus saw figures approaching. They moved with fluid grace, their robes seeming to shift color in the strange light. When the pod's canopy opened with a soft hiss, he got his first breath of air that hadn't been recycled for 50,000 years. It tasted of flowers and ozone, with an underlying sweetness that made his head spin. The first Luminari to reach him was clearly female, though her features were so refined, so perfect, that she seemed like a statue come to life. Her skin had a faint luminescence, and her eyes were the deep blue-black of space itself, flecked with points of light like distant stars. "Welcome back to the living universe, Marcus Chun," she said, and her voice was the same one that had spoken through his pod's communication system. "I am Lyra, speaker for this vessel. We have much to show you, and even more to ask of you." Marcus tried to sit up, but his muscles were weak from the long sleep. Lyra gestured, and he felt a gentle force help him rise, not mechanical assistance, but something that felt like telekinesis. "How do you know my name? How do you know English?" "Your pod's computer told us everything we needed to know," Lyra explained as other Luminari gathered around. "As for your language, it is the foundation upon which all of our tongues were built. We remember our origins, Marcus Chun. The question is whether you are ready to learn what those origins have become." As he was helped from the pod, Marcus caught sight of something that made him stop breathing. Along one wall of the docking bay, carved in flowing script that somehow felt familiar despite being completely alien, were words in what looked like evolved English. The letters were beautiful, artistic, but he could make out the meaning. "In memory of Earth that was. In hope of Earth that shall be again." "Earth," he whispered. "What happened to Earth?" Lyra's expression grew sad, and the light in her eyes dimmed slightly. "That is a long story, ancient one, and not one with a happy ending. But perhaps now that you have awakened, there might yet be hope for a new beginning." As they helped him walk on unsteady legs toward what he assumed was the ship's interior, Marcus caught glimpses of technology that defied his understanding. Walls that seemed to be alive, responding to touch with ripples of color. Gardens that grew in impossible spirals, reaching toward artificial suns. And everywhere, the Luminari moved with purpose, their enhanced forms adapted for a life among the stars. "You said you've been searching for pods like mine," Marcus said as they entered a corridor that stretched beyond his sight. "How many have you found, including you?" 17. Lyra's voice carried centuries of patient sadness. 17 humans from the time before, scattered across the galaxy in pods that were never meant to travel so far or sleep so long. Most were damaged beyond repair. Others, their occupants, did not survive the awakening. And the others? The ones who did survive. Lyra stopped walking and turned to face him. In the strange, shifting light of the ship's interior, Her expression was unreadable. They learned what we will teach you. They discovered what humanity has become in their absence. And then, Marcus Chun, they had to choose. Choose what? Whether to remain as they were, pure, unchanged, a living link to our past, or to join us in what we have become. To accept the transformation that allowed us to survive when Earth could not. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with his recent awakening. What happened to them? The others who awakened? Some chose to remain human, as you are now. They live in our protected enclaves, cherished and honored as living treasures. Others. She paused, and Marcus could see the weight of history in her starlight eyes. Others chose to evolve, to become something new, something that could survive what is coming. What's coming? Before Lyra could answer, the ship shuddered slightly, and an urgent chime echoed through the corridors. She pressed her hand against what looked like empty air, and symbols appeared in the space around her fingers, not holographic projections, but actual constructs of light and energy. We must accelerate our schedule, she said after a moment of silent communication. They have found us sooner than expected. Lyra began walking again, her pace now urgent. The Devourers. The reason Earth fell. The reason we had to change to survive. The reason we have been searching for every last pod, every last trace of unchanged humanity. As they hurried through the ship's corridors, Marcus began to see other recovered humans, people who looked like him, unmodified, living in beautifully appointed chambers that felt more like museums than homes. They watched him pass with expressions of sympathy and welcome, but also something else, something that might have been pity. Why? Marcus asked, struggling to keep up despite the artificial assistance helping his weakened legs. Why does it matter so much? Why search for 50,000 years just to find people like me? Lyra stopped before a massive chamber door that responded to her presence by flowing open like liquid metal. Beyond lay a vast space filled with what could only be described as a war room. Holographic displays showed star maps, ship movements, and data streams that hurt to look at directly. Because, she said, her voice carrying the weight of millennia, unchanged humans are the only ones who can use the weapons our ancestors hid. The weapons that might be able to stop what's coming. And, Marcus Chun, what's coming has been chasing us across the galaxy for 50,000 years. It's the reason your pod was found drifting in deep space instead of buried safely on Earth. What weapons? What are you talking about? But, before Lyra could answer, every display in the chamber flared to life, showing the same image. Massive, dark shapes emerging from what looked like tears in space itself. Ships, if they could be called that, but wrong in every conceivable way. They hurt to look at, as if they existed partially outside normal reality. The Devourers have found us, someone announced from across the chamber. 12 hours until contact. Lyra turned to Marcus, and for the first time since his awakening, he saw fear in her luminous eyes. Your education must begin now, Ancient One. Because whether you choose to remain human or become something more, you are about to face an enemy that has already destroyed one universe and is working on this one. As alarms began to sound throughout the ship, and Marcus felt the strange sensation of the vessel changing course at speeds that should have been impossible, he realized that waking up after 50,000 years was only the beginning of his story. The hardest part was about to begin. The chamber Lyra led him to defied every principle of physics Marcus thought he understood. It was simultaneously vast and intimate, with walls that seemed to curve away into infinity while somehow remaining close enough to touch. The ceiling showed not the interior of a ship, but what appeared to be actual space, stars wheeling overhead as if they stood on the surface of a planet with no atmosphere. This is the memory chamber, Lyra explained as they entered. Here, we preserve the history of what was, what is, and what might yet come to pass. Marcus felt his weakened legs give out, but instead of falling, he found himself gently supported by currents of air that felt almost alive. I need to understand, he said, his voice hoarse from disuse and shock. What happened to Earth? What are these Devourers? And why does any of this matter 50,000 years after my world ended? Lyra gestured, and the space around them transformed. Suddenly, they stood on what Marcus recognized as Earth, but not the Earth he remembered. This was a world of crystal cities that reached toward the clouds, of forests that glowed with bioluminescent beauty, of oceans that sparkled with life, both familiar and wonderfully strange. This was Earth, 3,000 years after your time, Lyra said, her voice filled with pride and loss. Humanity had recovered from the wars, learned to heal the damage, evolved beyond the need for conflict. We had spread to the stars, yes, but Earth remained our heart, our home. The scene shifted, showing massive space stations orbiting the planet, their surfaces teeming with gardens and cities. Ships moved between them like schools of graceful fish, their designs more art than engineering. People, recognizably human but clearly changed, moved through it all with purpose and joy. We thought ourselves masters of the universe, Lyra continued. We had conquered disease, death, scarcity. We had learned to reshape matter with thought, to travel between stars as easily as you once traveled between cities. We had even made contact with other species, learned from them, grown beyond what your generation thought possible. Marcus watched the display with growing wonder. This was what humanity could become, given time and wisdom. It's beautiful, he whispered. It was, Lyra agreed, and her tone carried the weight of profound loss. Until the day the universe began to unravel. The scene changed again, showing the same crystal cities, but now something was wrong. The edges of buildings flickered, as if they were losing coherence. People stopped in their daily activities, looking up at skies that had begun to pulse with unnatural light. The first sign was subtle, Lyra explained. Mathematical constants began to fluctuate. Physical laws that had governed reality for billions of years started to bend. Our greatest scientists thought it was a localized phenomenon, perhaps an experiment gone wrong. In the display, Marcus watched as sections of the beautiful cities simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not damaged, but erased, leaving geometric voids that hurt to look at. People fled from these expanding zones of non-existence, but there was nowhere to run. The devourers don't come from our universe, Lyra said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. They come from the spaces between universes, from the void that exists outside reality itself. They consume not just matter and energy, but the very laws that allow existence to be possible. The display showed Earth's final days. Massive ships, if they could be called ships, emerged from tears in space itself. They were wrong in ways that Marcus's mind struggled to process, existing in dimensions that shouldn't be possible, casting shadows that fell upward, and emitting light that made everything darker. Our weapons were useless, Lyra continued. How do you fight something that consumes the physics your weapons depend on? How do you battle entities that exist partially outside the reality you're trying to defend? Marcus watched humanity's desperate final stand. The evolved humans fought with technologies that looked like magic to his 21st century eyes, manipulating space-time, creating pocket universes as weapons, even attempting to accelerate their own evolution mid-battle to find some advantage against the impossible enemy. We tried everything, Lyra said. We evacuated what we could, scattered ourselves across the galaxy, hoped that distance might save us. But the devourers followed, slowly consuming world after world, system after system, leaving nothing but void in their wake. The scene shifted to show refugee fleets fleeing through space, carrying the last remnants of human civilization. But even as they ran, the pursuing darkness grew larger, and ships at the rear of the formations simply vanished, erased from existence along with everyone aboard. Some of us survived by changing, Lyra explained as the display showed humans undergoing rapid, radical evolution. Their forms became less solid, more adaptable, better suited to existence in the hostile universe they now inhabited. We learned to exist partially outside normal space-time, to spread our consciousness across multiple dimensions, to become something the devourers couldn't easily consume. You became what you are now, Marcus said, understanding beginning to dawn. We became the Luminari, she confirmed. Stable, surviving, but no longer truly human in the way you understand it. We can live in the void between stars, adapt to environments that would kill unmodified humans instantly, and hide from the devourers in ways they haven't learned to counter. But in becoming something that could survive, we lost something essential. The display changed again, showing what Marcus assumed were modern luminary settlements, beautiful beyond description, technologically advanced beyond imagination, but somehow cold, sterile. The beings that moved through them were graceful and perfect, but they seemed distant, disconnected from each other and from anything resembling human joy or passion. What did you lose? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. Choice, Lyra said simply. The ability to grow and change and become something unexpected. When we modified ourselves to survive the devourers, we locked ourselves into specific patterns of existence. We became predictable, stable, safe, but we stopped being able to truly evolve. Marcus studied her luminous features, seeing now what he had missed before. For all her beauty and grace, there was something static about her, as if she were a perfect sculpture rather than a living being capable of change and growth. The devourers adapt, she continued. They learn from every encounter, every species they consume. They're beginning to understand how we hide, how we survive. In another 1,000 years, maybe less, they'll find ways to consume us too. And when they do, when they finish with our galaxy, they'll move on to the next, and the next, until all of existence is nothing but void. But you said something about weapons, Marcus said. Weapons that only unchanged humans can use. The display shifted one final time, showing ancient human laboratories hidden deep within asteroids, on rogue planets drifting between stars, in space stations concealed within nebulae. In each one, scientists from before the Devourer's arrival worked frantically on projects that seemed to defy understanding. In the final days before Earth fell, our ancestors, your distant descendants, created weapons designed specifically to fight entities that exist outside normal reality, Lyra explained. Weapons that could only be activated by consciousness patterns that hadn't been modified for survival. They scattered them across the galaxy, hid them in places the Devourers would never think to look. Why unchanged consciousness? Marcus asked. What's so special about being unmodified? Because unchanged human consciousness is quantum entangled with the fundamental structure of reality in ways we no longer are, Lyra said. When we modified ourselves to survive, we severed those connections. We became stable, but we lost the ability to influence the deep structures of existence. You, Marcus Chun, can still touch the quantum foundations of the universe in ways we cannot. The implications hit him like a physical blow. You want me to use these weapons to fight the Devourers? We want to give you the choice, Lyra corrected. The same choice we've given to the other 16 who awakened. You can remain as you are, live safely in our enclaves, experience wonders beyond your imagination, and die peacefully when your natural lifespan ends. Or you can accept the responsibility that comes with being one of the last unmodified humans in the universe. What responsibility? Lyra gestured, and the chamber filled with new images, star maps showing the slow but relentless advance of the Devourer forces across the galaxy. Red zones marked regions that had been completely consumed, while yellow areas showed systems under attack. The few green sectors that remained seemed impossibly small. The responsibility of deciding whether existence itself continues, she said quietly. The weapons we've found require not just unchanged human consciousness, but willingness. They can't be fired by accident or under coercion. They respond only to beings who fully understand the choice they're making and accept its consequences. What consequences? Using the weapons changes you, Lyra admitted. Not in the same way our modifications changed us, but profoundly nonetheless. The first of your awakened predecessors to fire one of the ancient devices described it as touching the mind of the universe itself. He survived, and the weapon worked. It destroyed an entire Devourer fleet. But afterward, what happened to him? He became something new. Not luminary, not unchanged human, but something between and beyond both. He could see patterns in reality that the rest of us couldn't, understand connections across space, and time that no single consciousness should be able to process. It was beautiful and terrible and completely irreversible. Marcus felt the weight of impossible choices settling on his shoulders. How many of the others chose to use the weapons? 7, Lyra said. 7 chose to remain fully human and live out their lives in peace. 7 others chose to become luminari, to gain the safety of modification. And 3 chose to become something new. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of technologies beyond his understanding. Marcus looked up at the starfield ceiling, trying to process everything he'd learned. 50,000 years ago, he'd gone to sleep expecting to wake up to a rebuilt world. Instead, he'd awakened to find himself one of the last hopes for the survival of existence itself. "The 3 who used the weapons," he said finally. "Where are they now?" "Gone," Lyra said, and for the first time since his awakening, he heard genuine emotion in her voice. "They used the weapons, saved entire star systems, held the Devourers back for centuries. But then, they vanished into deep space, pursuing purposes we can no longer understand. We receive occasional transmissions from them, warnings about Devourer movements, locations of hidden weapons, fragments of knowledge about reality itself. But they're no longer entirely here. And you want me to make the same choice." "We want you to have the chance to make it," Lyra corrected. "Because in 12 hours, a Devourer fleet will arrive in this system. They've been hunting this ship for 300 years, ever since we found the first pod. We've always managed to escape before, but this time they've cornered us. This time, we fight or we all die." Marcus stood slowly, his muscles finally beginning to remember how to support his weight. The choice before him seemed impossible: remain human and likely die along with everyone else, become something alien and stable but ultimately doomed, or transform into something beyond current understanding and risk losing his humanity entirely. "What would you choose?" he asked Lyra. "If you could make the choice again, knowing what you know now, what would you decide?" She was quiet for a long moment, her luminous eyes reflecting depths of experience and regret. "I don't know," she finally admitted. "We Luminari are no longer capable of true uncertainty. We see the logical paths, calculate the probabilities, choose the course most likely to result in survival. But you're asking me to remember what it felt like to face the unknown without knowing the outcome. Try." Lyra closed her eyes, and, for a moment, her luminous skin dimmed. When she opened them again, Marcus could see something there that hadn't been present before, something almost like the messy, complicated emotions he remembered from his own species. "I think," she said slowly, "I would choose to fight. Not because the odds are good, they aren't. Not because the transformation would be easy, it won't be. But because the alternative is to let existence itself end, and that's not really a choice at all." Marcus nodded, understanding flooding through him. The choice wasn't really between safety and danger, or between remaining human and becoming something else. The choice was between accepting responsibility for the universe or turning away from it. "Where are these weapons?" he asked. Lyra smiled, and, for the first time since his awakening, it seemed entirely genuine. "The nearest cache is hidden in the core of a neutron star 6 hours away. The weapon itself is a device that can rewrite local reality, forcing the Devourers back into the void between universes. Using it will require you to interface directly with physics at the quantum level. And that will change me. That will change everything," she corrected. "But perhaps that's what the universe needs. Not preservation of what was, but transformation into what could be." The chamber shuddered as the ship changed course, heading toward what Marcus could only assume was their destiny. As they prepared to leave the memory chamber, he took one last look at the images of Earth that was, the Luminari that humanity had become, and the vast empty spaces where the Devourers had consumed entire civilizations. "One more question," he said as they reached the door. "Why did my pod survive? If Earth fell 50,000 years ago, how did I end up drifting in deep space?" Lyra paused, her hand on the door control. "Your pod wasn't buried in an underground bunker when the Devourers came," she said quietly. "It was already in space, part of a desperate evacuation effort that launched just before Earth fell. You've been drifting between the stars all this time, one of thousands of pods scattered across the galaxy in humanity's final act of hope. Hope for what? That someday, someone like us would find you. That the unchanged would awaken when the universe needed them most. That the choice would be made by someone who still remembered what it meant to be human." As they left the memory chamber and headed toward whatever came next, Marcus realized that waking up after 50,000 years was the easy part. Now he had to decide what kind of future he was willing to fight for, and what he was willing to become to ensure it existed at all. The journey to the neutron star took 6 hours that felt like 6 years. Marcus spent the time in what the Luminari called a preparation chamber, a space that somehow existed both inside the ship and partially outside normal reality. Here, they began the process of educating his unchanged human consciousness about the true nature of existence. Reality is not as solid as your species once believed, explained Kale, another Luminari who had introduced himself as a bridgewalker, one of their kind who specialized in moving between different states of existence. Unlike Lyra's graceful luminescence, Kale seemed to flicker at the edges, as if he were constantly shifting between multiple versions of himself. Your ancestors discovered that consciousness and physics are more intimately connected than anyone imagined. Kale continued as geometric patterns of light danced around them, illustrating concepts that Marcus's brain wasn't quite ready to process. Observation doesn't just measure reality, it actively participates in creating it. Marcus watched as the patterns showed the familiar double-slit experiment from quantum physics, but expanded into dimensions his mind struggled to follow. I understand the basics of quantum mechanics, he said. Observer effect, wave function collapse, entanglement. Those are shadows of the truth, Kale said with something that might have been amusement. What your scientists glimpsed was the surface of something much deeper. Consciousness, particularly unmodified human consciousness, exists in quantum superposition with the fundamental forces of reality. When we changed ourselves to survive the devourers, we collapsed that superposition into a single, stable state. The patterns shifted, showing two different types of beings. One flickered constantly between multiple possibilities, while the other remained static, but safe. We gained survival at the cost of creative potential, Kale explained. We can no longer influence reality at the quantum level because we no longer exist in multiple states simultaneously. But I can. You can. The question is whether you'll survive the experience. The ship shuddered as it began to approach the neutron star, and Marcus felt the artificial gravity fluctuate in ways that made his stomach lurch. Through the chamber's walls, which had become transparent to show the outside view, he could see their destination, a sphere of impossible density, its surface gravity so intense that atoms themselves were crushed into exotic forms of matter. The weapon cache is located in the star's core, Lyra said as she entered the chamber. Her luminous form seemed dimmer now, and Marcus realized she was directing most of her energy toward maintaining the ship's defenses. The only way to access it is through quantum tunneling, existing in multiple states simultaneously until you can phase through the neutron matter. That's impossible, Marcus said automatically, then caught himself. I mean, for normal matter it's impossible. For normal matter, yes, Kale agreed. But consciousness operating at quantum levels can achieve temporary superposition. The weapon was designed to be accessible only to beings who could exist in multiple realities at once. Your ancestors were very thorough in their security measures. The preparation continued as they drew closer to the neutron star. Marcus learned that reality was far more malleable than he had ever imagined, that the universe existed in countless overlapping dimensions, and that human consciousness was somehow uniquely suited to navigate between them. The information came not through words but through direct transfer, images, and concepts flowing into his mind faster than his normal thoughts could process. It was like trying to drink from a waterfall, and Marcus felt his sense of identity beginning to blur at the edges. Was he still Marcus Chun, the man who had gone to sleep 50,000 years ago? Or was he becoming something else, something that could hold the knowledge necessary to operate weapons beyond imagination? Contact, announced a voice throughout the ship, and suddenly, the chamber's walls displayed tactical information that made Marcus's head spin. The Devourer fleet had arrived, 12 massive shapes that existed partially outside normal space, their presence causing distortions in reality itself. They're different from the projections you showed me, Marcus observed, studying the enemy vessels. These weren't the geometric impossibilities he'd seen in the memory chamber. They seemed more focused, more purposeful. They evolve, Lyra explained, her voice tense with concentration as she coordinated the ship's defenses. These are hunters, specialized for tracking entities like us. They've adapted specifically to counter Luminari hiding techniques. How long do we have? Minutes, Kale said bluntly. They're already beginning to destabilize local spacetime. If we don't reach the weapons soon, the neutron star itself will collapse into a black hole. The ship dove toward the impossibly dense star, and Marcus felt reality beginning to bend around them. The walls of the chamber became translucent, then transparent, then seemed to disappear entirely. He could see the ship's structure laid out around him like a wireframe drawing, could perceive the crew members as complex patterns of energy and intention rather than physical beings. The transition is beginning, Kale announced. Marcus, you need to open your consciousness to quantum superposition. Don't fight the multiplicity, embrace it. Marcus tried to relax, to let go of his insistence on being one person in one place at one time. It was like trying to forget how to breathe while drowning. His mind recoiled from the sensation of existing in multiple states, of being simultaneously inside the ship and outside it, of perceiving events that were happening and might happen and could never happen all at the same time. I can't, he gasped, his consciousness snapping back to a single, stable state. It's too much. The ship shuddered as devourer weapons struck their shields, weapons that didn't just cause damage but actually erased small portions of the ship from existence. Through his enhanced perception, Marcus could see gaps in the vessel's structure where reality itself had been consumed. You have to try again, Lyra urged. We're almost at the star's surface, but the weapon is still 3 kilometers down, inside matter compressed beyond anything you can imagine. Marcus looked at the tactical display, watching as the Luminari ship fought desperately against enemies that shouldn't have been able to exist. Their weapons were graceful and precise, manipulating space and time with artistic beauty. But the Devourers simply absorbed everything thrown at them, growing stronger and more coherent with each attack. What happens if I fail? He asked. Everyone on this ship dies, Kale said matter-of-factly. The Devourers add our knowledge to their own, learning new ways to hunt the remaining Luminari fleets. Within a century, they consume the last pockets of organized resistance. Within a millennium, they finish with this galaxy and move on to the next. And if I succeed? Unknown, Lyra admitted. The weapon has only been used 3 times. Each activation bought us centuries of reprieve, but the Devourers always adapt eventually. This time might be different. They're more focused now, more intelligent. The weapon might not work at all. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices. Behind his eyelids, he could see the quantum patterns Kale had shown him, the multiple layers of reality stacked on top of each other like infinite sheets of glass. Somewhere in that maze of possibilities was the version of himself that could reach the weapon. Tell me about the others, he said. The 3 who used the weapons before me. What were they like afterward? Lyra and Kale exchanged glances, a communication that happened faster than thought, in languages of pure meaning that Marcus's unchanged mind couldn't follow. The first was Elena Vasquez, Lyra finally said. A biologist from your era who awakened 500 years ago. After using the weapon, she could perceive life at levels we couldn't imagine, not just individual organisms, but the quantum patterns that connected all living things across space and time. The second was Chun Wei-Ming, a physicist. He began to see mathematics not as abstract concepts, but as living entities, fundamental forces with personalities and intentions. He claimed that numbers themselves were fighting the Devourers on levels we couldn't perceive. And the third, Sarah Kim, an artist, Kale said softly. She understood reality as a vast canvas, one that could be painted and repainted at will. After using the weapon, she began creating pocket universes, small spaces where the laws of physics followed aesthetic rather than mathematical principles. Marcus opened his eyes, studying the 2 Luminari. They didn't go insane. They became something more. Or something different, Lyra corrected. Whether it's more depends on your perspective. They gained capabilities we can't imagine, but they also lost something essential to the human experience, the ability to exist fully in any single moment or reality. The ship's hull screamed as Devourer weapons tore through their remaining defenses. Marcus could feel the vessel beginning to break apart around them, reality coming undone as the enemy's influence spread. Now or never, he said, and before either Luminari could respond, he threw himself into quantum superposition. The sensation was like dying and being reborn across infinite dimensions simultaneously. Marcus felt his consciousness scatter across countless possible states, versions of himself that had made different choices, lived different lives, awakened to different futures. In one layer of reality, he was still asleep in his pod. In another, Earth had never fallen. In a third, he had never been born at all. But threading through all the possibilities was a single, constant truth: his determination to protect what remained of existence itself. He fell through the neutron star's surface, his consciousness phased into a quantum state that allowed him to pass through matter compressed beyond imagination. The pressure should have crushed him instantly, but he wasn't entirely there. He existed in the spaces between particles, in the quantum foam that bubbled beneath reality's surface. The weapon cache appeared around him like a crystalline cathedral built from pure mathematics. It had been waiting here for millennia, powered by the neutron star's immense gravitational energy, and protected by layers of quantum encryption that only unchanged human consciousness could unravel. The weapon itself was beautiful and terrible, a sphere of some impossible material that seemed to contain an entire universe within its surface. As Marcus approached it, he could feel its awareness turning toward him, recognizing the patterns of his unmodified mind. Are you prepared for the burden of creation? The question came not in words, but in concepts that bypassed language entirely, speaking directly to the quantum foundations of his consciousness. Marcus thought about everyone who had ever lived, everyone who might yet live, all the infinite possibilities that would be lost if the Devourers succeeded in consuming existence itself. He thought about Elena, Chun, and Sarah, the three who had made this choice before him and accepted the consequences. Yes, he answered, opening his mind to the weapon's influence. The sphere dissolved into pure information, flowing into his consciousness like liquid light. Suddenly, Marcus could see reality as it truly was, not solid matter and empty space, but patterns of possibility constantly collapsing and reforming, guided by the observations and intentions of conscious beings. He could see the Devourers clearly now, understand what they really were. They weren't from outside the universe. They were the universe's own attempt to return to a state of perfect entropy, to eliminate the complexity and chaos that allowed life and meaning to exist. They were cosmic cancer, spreading across reality and consuming the very foundations that made existence possible. But Marcus could also see the cure. The weapon didn't just destroy the Devourers. It rewrote local reality, restoring the quantum foundations that allowed complexity and life to flourish. It was like performing surgery on the universe itself, cutting out the infected regions and replacing them with healthy possibility space. He reached out with his transformed consciousness, touching the quantum patterns that surrounded the neutron star. The weapon responded, channeling his intent through mathematical structures that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Reality exploded outward from the neutron star in a wave of pure creation. The Devourer fleet, caught in the weapon's effect, simply ceased to be, not destroyed, but transformed back into the quantum foam from which all existence emerged. The distortions they had caused in space-time healed instantly, like a wound closing. But Marcus could feel the weapon's power continuing to flow through him, rewriting not just the immediate area, but vast regions of space. Dead systems where the Devourers had consumed entire civilizations began to bloom with new possibilities. Planets that had been erased from existence rematerialized, not as they had been, but as they could be. Perfect worlds where life could flourish without the constant threat of cosmic annihilation. Enough, Marcus thought, trying to pull back from the weapon's influence. But it was too late. He had opened himself to forces beyond his comprehension, and they were remaking him from the quantum level up. His consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of his individual identity. He could perceive the thoughts and dreams of every living being in the galaxy, Feel the slow pulse of cosmic evolution. Understand the intricate dance of cause and effect that connected all things across space and time. He was still Marcus Chun, but he was also something more, a bridge between human possibility and cosmic necessity, a guardian of the infinite potential that made existence meaningful. Through his expanded awareness, he sensed the Luminari ship materializing nearby, its crew safe, but stunned by what they had witnessed. He could feel Lyra and Kale's mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that the immediate threat had been ended, sorrow that they had lost another unchanged human to the weapon's transformative power. "I'm not lost," Marcus tried to tell them, projecting his thoughts across the quantum foam that connected all conscious beings. "I'm just more distributed than before." The neutron star had been transformed too, its crushing gravity replaced by something gentler, a beacon of creation that would guide lost beings towards safety for millennia to come. And, deep within its core, the weapon waited patiently for the next time it might be needed, the next unchanged human who would accept the responsibility of reshaping reality itself. Marcus felt himself beginning to drift away from the immediate area, his consciousness drawn by currents in the cosmic background radiation that spoke of other threats, other places where existence itself was under siege. Before he left, he reached out one last time to the Luminari ship, leaving behind a gift, coordinates for 17 more weapon caches hidden across the galaxy, along with detailed instructions for finding and awakening other pods containing unchanged humans. The battle was won, but the war for existence itself continued. And somewhere in the quantum depths of reality, Marcus Chun, guardian, weapon, and bridge between what was and what could be, set out to find the next battlefield in humanity's 50,000-year struggle to keep the universe alive.